In the rolling hills of Kisii, where ancient spirits whisper through morning mist, there lived a woman whose eyes could pierce the veil of time. Her name was Moraa Wangiti, and she would reveal what lay beneath an empire's mask. From her earliest days, Moraa was different. While other children played in sunshine, she sat in shadows, her young eyes distant and knowing. The ancestors had marked her for a path that would shake the foundations of two worlds. In sacred dreams that came like storms in the night, Moraa saw pale-skinned strangers arriving from across great waters, bringing chains and sorrow. But one vision burned brightest. She saw Ombati, a trusted elder from her own people, standing beside the invaders with silver in his palms. "A snake will rise from our own garden," she warned the village elders. "One of our own will open the door for our enemies." The elders listened with respect, but in their hearts they doubted. How could one of their own betray the bonds of blood? Time would prove Moraa's gift to be both blessing and curse. In 1900, exactly as the spirits had shown her, Ombati traveled to Kisumu and witnessed British power. Something dark stirred within him, and he made his choice. He allied with the pale invaders, becoming their guide into Kisii lands. When news of the betrayal reached Moraa, her heart broke. But she knew this was only the beginning. "Chaga osirebuna Ombati asirete," she declared. "Die the same way Ombati died." Those words became a proverb that echoes through Kisii culture today, a warning to any who would betray their own people. When the British arrived in force in 1904, they expected scattered resistance. Instead, they found something they couldn't understand. A people guided by supernatural wisdom, coordinated by a woman who seemed to know their moves before they made them. In 1907, Geoffrey Northcote arrived as the first British administrator. When he first stepped into the Kisii market in his crisp uniform, expecting the usual colonial deference, Moraa was ready. She had studied him with those piercing eyes and saw what others missed, the mark of spiritual corruption written in his very being. "Look upon this man," she declared to the gathered people, her voice cutting through the market noise like a blade. "See how he sweats and suffers in our healthy land? Only the spiritually corrupted cannot find peace in blessed soil." The crowd murmured, suddenly seeing the British administrator through new eyes. "This is what happens when evil walks where it doesn't belong," Moraa continued. "The very earth rejects such beings. That is why they tremble here, why they suffer in our sacred land." In one masterful stroke, she transformed everything. Where the British projected superiority, Moraa revealed corruption. Where they claimed civilization, she exposed spiritual decay. Where they demanded respect, she offered pity. The impact was immediate and devastating. Kisii people began looking at British officials not as conquerors, but as spiritually corrupted beings who didn't belong on their sacred land. Northcote felt the change instantly. In his frustrated reports, he wrote, "There is a woman here, some kind of priestess, who wields significant influence. She has been aloof and broods, with anger in her heart and suspicion." But Moraa's greatest weapon was yet to be unleashed. For years, she had been preparing her nephew, Otenyo Nyamaterere, a young warrior she had raised since childhood. Under her guidance, Otenyo grew strong in the conviction that these invaders were spiritually weak, corrupted beings who could be defeated. When the British raided cattle camps in January 1908, stealing over 8,000 head of livestock, Moraa knew destiny had arrived. "Otenyo," she said as the sun set on that day of theft, "the spirits have shown me what must be done." That night, in the sacred grove, Moraa performed the ritual she had prepared for years. She rubbed protective medicines into Otenyo's skin and filled him with unshakable belief. "The corrupted man must be made to bleed," she whispered. "Only then will our people see these invaders are not gods, but corrupted mortals who fall like any other." The ambush near Manga was spiritual warfare made manifest. As Northcote's column moved along the path with stolen cattle, Otenyo waited in the sacred bushes. When the moment came, he rose like an avenging ancestor, his spear flying with divine precision. The weapon found Northcote's shoulder, sending the British commander crashing to earth in a spray of very human blood. Every Kisii warrior present witnessed the truth of Moraa's teaching. The supposedly superior pale man lay bleeding in dust, no different from any mortal struck by a spear. Word spread like wildfire. The foreign invader had been made to bleed. For 30 days, resistance erupted across Kisii territory as warriors struck with fearlessness born of Moraa's wisdom. The myth of colonial invincibility lay shattered in the dust with Northcote's blood. But empires possess terrible claws when wounded. The British counterattack was merciless. Over 160 Kisii people died. Otenyo was captured, tried publicly, and executed. But the final cruelty was yet to come. They severed his head and shipped it to London as a trophy. When the terrible news reached Moraa, her heart shattered. The young man she had raised was destroyed because of her visions, her teachings, her war against the corrupted invaders. The guilt nearly broke her spirit, but her true test was yet to come. The manhunt for Moraa was swift. Collaborators whispered her location to colonial officers. At dawn, soldiers surrounded her hiding place. She offered no resistance as they bound her hands and dragged her to Kisii police station. In the interrogation room, a British officer sat across from her, confident that pressure would break the old woman's spirit. "You will tell us how to stop these attacks," he demanded. Moraa looked at him with penetrating eyes, seeing the corrupted spirit beneath his uniform. "I will tell you nothing," she replied quietly. "We have ways of making you cooperate." Moraa smiled with the satisfaction of prophecy fulfilled. "You have already told me everything I need to know." "What do you mean?" "You chain an old woman because her words frightened you. You must break spirits because you cannot win hearts." Her eyes blazed with inner fire. "Who among us is truly corrupted?" For 3 days and nights, they tried everything. Solitary confinement in total darkness, starvation, hours of shouting and threats. But Moraa remained unbroken. In the darkest moments, she spoke with ancestors, drawing strength from spirits that had guided her since childhood. Every method they used only proved her teachings. They were so threatened by an old woman's words, they had to torture her. So insecure they needed chains and darkness to maintain power. On the 4th day, the British officer finally understood something chilling. She had already won. Every act of torture proved exactly what she'd been saying. They weren't superior beings bringing civilization. They were corrupted, frightened men who could only maintain power through cruelty. When they released her, Moraa walked out with head high and spirit blazing brighter than ever. She had looked at an empire and called it corrupted. She had watched them prove her right with every act of violence, every desperate attempt to silence her. Moraa returned to her people, and though her body was weakened, her spirit burned with vindication. She had stared into the heart of colonial power and seen its true nature, not strength, but brutality masquerading as civilization. When death came in 1929, Moraa passed into the realm of ancestors, knowing she had kept faith with her visions. She had seen truth about foreign invaders and spoken it fearlessly. Today, in sacred groves of Kisii, wind still carries whispers of Moraa's teachings. In 2023, Kenya honored her during Mashujaa Day celebrations. A monument will ensure future generations remember the woman who dared speak truth to power. But her greatest monument lives in the understanding she planted, that true strength comes not from weapons, but from courage to see clearly and speak truthfully. The legend of Moraa Wangiti endures as proof that some spirits cannot be conquered, Some truths cannot be silenced, and some visions burn so bright they illuminate darkness for generations unborn. Her name was Moraa Wangiti, the seer who taught an empire the difference between power and corruption, between conquest and spiritual decay, between chains that bind the body and fire that liberates the soul. The woman who called white men corrupted had the last word after all.